Okay, welcome to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Daishihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts and OnlineNinjaAcademy.com. There's the URL. Anyway, so this episode, what we're going to do is take a look at, it's not like we don't do this on a regular basis, but some sneaky manipulation tactics, right? So the core idea of this session is really focused on breaking his strength, his balance, his control, that kind of stuff with some advanced body movement. Now, when I say advanced, a lot of people are going to look at it or see some of this stuff, or even if you make it in for the Friday class, look at it and go, well, that's not like advanced body movement. Well, yeah, it is, right? It's the application of things and understanding what to look for, to understand what you're looking at, and some key factors, right? Which is what we're going to take a look at today, right? So anyway, right, let's start with our usual format, right? We'll take a look at a problem, right? So martial arts, and I know I fell prey to this as well when I first got started, right? So martial arts techniques, kata, that kind of thing. If we're just looking at them at face value, right, and we don't know what we're looking at, or we don't know what we're supposed to be looking at, right, they imply a static start and like a finite ending, right? So here's this, this little moment in time, right? X, Y, Z, do this thing. He does this, you do this, and ta-da, right? It's all over, right? It implies kind of a two-dimensional thinking, again, to those who don't know what they're looking at, right? But we have to remember that the way a lot of these things got passed on long before technology caught up, right? Long before video like this, right? Where I could be demonstrating a technique and explaining certain things and whatnot. What you had was the written word, right? And because paper was extremely expensive, right? It was all handmade, artisans. You get this stuff, or it was written out of planks of wood or whatever. You made your own ink, right? They had these soot sticks, and you make your own frickin' ink. And if you've ever done that, it takes a long time to make a small batch. Anyway, so things were summarized and paraphrased, right? But there were some keys that were kind of put into the kata that, again, if you don't know what you're looking for, it looks like a box. So that's where you get this argument between the people that are kata purists, right? There's only one right way to do it, and people that have been in fights or have tried doing those kind of things, and it doesn't work out that way, right? So now there's this, kata yes, kata no, whatever. We're not here to talk about kata, but that's going to play into a piece of this, because what I'm going to be teaching on, again, for the purist, right, that's not what's written. It's not in the scrolls. So therefore, but there are things that are there that, right? And again, that's why in my title I have advanced, right? Advanced body movement, advanced understanding, that kind of stuff, right? Kids and the unknowing will always argue over petty details without kind of a broader understanding. Anyway, that being said, right? So I think we can all agree that fights and attacks, right, survival attacks, are very dynamic, right? There's a lot of motion, there's a lot of movement, things like that. Regardless of whether we're dancing around, right? We're not talking about in a ring, where we can see a lot of that dancing around. Whether it's over in 2 to 10 seconds, like the typical self-defense attack, which is why it's really important to get really good at stuff and to have a bunch of knowledge, tactics, and strategies in your wheelhouse or in your toolbox, because it doesn't work like the MMA fight you watched on pay-per-view, or the boxing, or even the high school fights that, dancing around and that. Right? The average self-defense situation is over in 2 to 10 seconds, and even if it's a full-blown, like a workplace violence, active shooter kind of thing, right? Those things are over in way less than 10 minutes. Okay, so anyway, right? We can agree that they're dynamic, right? But here's the thing, right? Kata are places to start. As a matter of fact, let's just jump in right there. Okay. I'm gonna skip down here a little bit, right? So kata or techniques. Even like if I'm in a self-defense class and we don't have kata, whatever, we just have, okay, we're gonna do a defense tonight against a hook punch or a right cross or a jab or an uppercut or whatever, right? So here's this technique, and then you write down the description and whatnot, right? So I don't care. I don't care if we're using the Eastern martial arts, Japanese kind of word, or we're just calling it a technique, an example, a model, right? Okay. So again, we've had individual sessions on these things. So if some of this is old hat for you because you've been around and following this series for a while, just you're gonna have to pardon me for a minute because I have to catch up the folks who are just watching this for the first time. Okay. All right. So at their core, right, kata, right, indicate, right, the place to start. Okay. So here's this model, right? I always tell my students at varying levels, right? If they're in the beginning stages, I tell them, here's the kata. You don't screw with it. We're not going to do variations. We're not going to do anything like that. When test comes up, I'm testing you on this thing. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Well, does that mean it's always going to be used that way to fight? It doesn't matter right now. Okay. Here's the thing. In the beginning, a kata is an expert role model. So you want to be an expert. Here's stuff that experts who were in war all the time and surviving passed down. So you want to be an expert? Here's how an expert would do it. Okay, at least in this, from this perspective, right? Every school has its own little nuances and whatnot, but here's the thing, right? For my upper intermediate advanced students, right? Then I redefine kata and I tell them, look, no changing kata. This is after going through variations, and then we go back to kata, right? And I tell them, look, no variations, no adjustments or whatever, because at your level now, kata are bad habit breakers. If you can't do the kata and you constantly have to vary things, then it's not the kata. The kata has lasted for hundreds of years, right? There's something off in your movement, your timing, your angling, your understanding, whatever, right? So, but either way, it's a place to start depending on what it is that we're working on, right? Okay. But it's also a snapshot. Okay, it's a snapshot in time, but also of potential. Okay, also potential, right? So here's an example of how to handle this thing based on the given variables that we're presenting, right? Based on timing, distancing, angling, alignment with his targets, what he is set up to do next, those kind of things, right? So it's this little snapshot within a fight, within an overall fight or an overall survival situation. Okay, we'll talk about that more in a minute, right? There are also ideals. Okay, wouldn't it be cool if this guy threw his one shot and bang, fight was over, attack was over? Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? Okay, and that's something to hold on to, but ideals are things that we work toward, right? It's the goal, right? It's the level of mastery or whatever, right? So here's the ideal. Everything goes right. Nothing goes wrong. He makes all the mistakes. We're on the money, that kind of thing, okay? But on the flip side, right, there are also worst case scenarios. I told you this was going to lead to the manipulation tactics and all that, right? So there are also worst case scenarios, okay? For me to be standing here, my partner's already loaded, right? They're either in a modern kind of thing or they're in this classic kind of thing, and they're all loaded for bear, right? And here I am standing in this natural position, watching it happen, and it comes in, right? And if you understand these classical models, they're taking the center line, right? They're not throwing hook punches or whatever. If you understand them taking the center line as an advantage, where they're coming down the middle and you've got to move half your body off that line, not get clipped, all that kind of stuff, right? They really have the advantageous position. They're already set to go. They can go whenever they want. And here you are just standing there, right? And you're absolutely static, right? So there's a lot of implications that are going on in here where I have to go from no movement to being able to defend against this thing. He's coming in, all my targets are open, all his targets are closed, he's attacking, right? And I've got to be able to flip this to go from all my targets open, all his targets closed, to in one move, all my targets are closed, he's missing, and all of his targets are opening up, right? That's the strategy, right? The tactics, how we do it, the angling we use, the distance we use, the position of body parts, the kami, right, that we use, is how that happens, right? But again, if we're just looking at these things, step 1, step 2, step 3, and we can't see what's going on, we can't see the science behind, right? And I know I've got people that comment on my videos all the time, right? You need to stop talking about this fucking fight science BS, right? Just put on some gloves, man, and just get in the ring and go to town with some. Okay, so I'm just supposed to do what everybody else does, right? Give myself no advantage outside of speed or strength or whatever. Okay, that's good in the contest, I guess, right? But from a survival situation, from a street situation, I don't even want this to be a fair fight, an even kind of thing. Right? Well, I'd like that. That'd be awesome, right? But what are the chances that it's going to be even, or what are the chances that I'm going to have, other than what I know that he doesn't know I know, what are the chances that I have the advantage, right? The guy on the street that's really, really good at mugging people, or the criminal attacker or whatever, right? There's things that they look for. We can cover that in a different episode of this, or we can take a look at it in Kuden to make sure we're not radiating, right? We're doing all this training, but the way we carry ourselves, the way we use our eyes, the aura that we present and whatnot, that we're not just like, signaling victim and all the shit that we're trying to cover up with this facade of toughness. Yeah, people that are really, really good at attacking and identifying targets and victims, yeah, they can see right through that bullshit. Okay, so anyway, right? So worst case scenarios, that kind of thing. Where again, it's a static start, right? I'm not moving around, so there's a lot of implications going on in here. Okay, so here's a way to look at the Ura, or the hidden side of kata, right? You know what? But first, do me a favor. If you could just like and share this stuff, that'd be really, really cool. I don't know if you know how this kind of stuff works, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, but there's this freaking computer program in the background called an algorithm, right? $50 word out of a $5 mouth, that pays attention to the clicks and the likes and the shares and things like that as a way to identify what's popular, what's not, okay? So people like it, they comment, they share, all that kind of stuff. It all kind of ramps things up, and then that tells the platform, again, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, YouTube, if you're on YouTube, it tells it to show it more because it's popular. But it doesn't tell it to just show it more. It tells it to show it more to people like you, right? So if you can do that, then other people that are interested in this side of the training and that need this kind of training and lesson are more likely to get it, more likely to be able to find it. Okay, I mean, you don't have to, right? You do you, right? But I'd appreciate if you could. And it is helping us out because we can get more things out. But I'm really thinking about getting this stuff out to as many people as possible that want this side of the training, right? That want this advantage. Okay, so if you can help with that, I'd appreciate it. They will probably never meet you, but they'd appreciate it too. All right. So anyway. All right. Okay. Again, let's look at something here, right? It's just kind of this hidden side of kata, right? Because again, we started off talking about how the implication, if we just look at kata, the implication is that here's this box, right? Here's this model, this form, right? It has a specific beginning, right? There's shit that you do in here, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, whatever, and then there's an ending, right? And it implies start a fight, end a fight. No, it doesn't. Okay? There's nothing in any of the scrolls or any of the demonstrations that my teachers have ever done, lessons that I've ever gotten or whatever, there's nothing in there that is a statement or implication that this is all there is. Okay? As a matter of fact, there are things that are actually built into the kata. Remember, these are static definitions, ink on paper, but there are things that are built into them that point out this grander kind of piece that we need to be able to understand, right? one thing to look at something. It's one thing to be able to understand what you see, what you read, or whatever. And it's a whole other thing to be able to look at that and be able to see past the example or the model to what's being conveyed, right? So we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I want to take a look at is, right, here's this idea of a kata. I just put it in the box, right? So here's this thing that people see, right? But what if I do this and my partner or the bad guy doesn't end up on the ground, locked up, running away, unconscious, whatever? They just stagger back and fight's not over yet. The attack's not over yet, right? So someone's going to come after. Something better come after. But what are we going to do? We're going to do our style, right? We're going to do the stuff that we learned in class, and then we have this oh shit moment, and then what? We're just going to do whatever, okay? For my students, that's kind of a below second degree black belt kind of thing. But here's this, there's going to be something else needed, right? But did the fight really start, or the attack really start with this guy in front of you all loaded for bear, and then you're either standing this way or you're standing in your own, and then bow, right? There's this big explosion and fist and feet are flying or whatever, right? And there's this thing, right? Well, in sport events, and this doesn't help, right? In sporting events, if you watch MMA bouts, if you watch boxing, wrestling, whatever, right? People come out, they bow, or they bump gloves, or whatever. They might talk smack, they might glare at each other, but either way, there's this kind of a moment where their head's in the game, fully in the game. They know shit's about to get real. And then a bell rings, a buzzer goes, a whistle blows, a gunshot, whatever, and fight's on. As an ex-federal cop and as somebody who got the shit beat out of him quite a bit growing up until I figured out this, how to not let that shit happen, right? That's not how things happen. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on before, right? So while I have kata here, we're going to expand that out a little bit more. But my point here is that when we're looking at a kata, when we're practicing a kata, we have to recognize that that kata could be the beginning of the fight, right? Whatever it is that you're trying, okay? Could be the beginning. And if that doesn't work, something else is going to come after it. And if that doesn't work, something else is going to come after it, right? It could be the middle of the fight where something came before. Maybe it's not kata, right? Shit came before. I try this thing. It didn't work out completely. Knocked him down. He got back up, whatever. Okay. Or I put this guy down. His friend comes off a bar stool, gets out of a car, comes running across the field, whatever. And now I've got more shit to happen, right? So kata could be the middle of the fight where something led up to it. Here we go. And if it doesn't work out, hopefully it works out. But in this case, the middle of the fight, it doesn't. And so there's this next thing. Or the kata could be the end of the fight. It could be the thing. Something came before it, and then we do this thing, and it ends things, right? So we've got this chain of events that kind of work this way, right? So I think it's really important for at least upper intermediate, if not people that are wearing a piece of black around their waist, right? To be looking at kata this way instead of looking at them in a bubble, right? Instead of looking at them like they're in a box, right? That it's a potential, but there's a timeline, right? I made this big old red box around here, right? This is the fight or the attack, the whole thing, right? But when you read these things in the scrolls, well, unless you know what you're looking for, what it looks like is I've got a kata with a name, I got a kata with a name, I got a kata with a name, right? And again, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, right? But what we have is an encounter. What we have is an experience. Where does that fit, right? So again, I've covered this kind of stuff in the past. So for those of you who, again, have seen this, no big deal. But what I want to take a look at, right? So I'm going to change, where's my, let's use a different color, right? So, okay, I'm going to go back to isolating these things, right? But what I want to look at, we're just going to go back to my main one that's right here. Okay, so let's do this. Let's do it like this. Okay, so you're going to take a kata, okay? Right? Because the idea would be that's the whole fight, but whatever, right? What I want to take a look at, not this as kata, right? There's another word in Japanese, waza, and waza can mean technique as well. But when I look at waza technique as opposed to kata technique, to me, kata are made up of multiple waza, right? So it's more like, you could say technique, but it's more like skill, okay? So there's this thing that you're doing, and it does have a form to it, it does have a structure to it, but what I want to do is I want to take a look today, we're going to look right here, okay? We're going to look at breaking up that static start, okay? Because, well, here's an analogy, right? If you drive or you ride a bike, whatever, okay? If you bring that vehicle, bike, car, moped, whatever, to a dead stop at a stop sign, intersection, your driveway, whatever, and then go to start moving again, it takes an enormous amount of energy to get in motion. Once you're in motion, you can ease up on the pedaling, you change gears, balance is easier, right? Everything is, it's just easier, right? You've got inertia working for you, you got all kinds of stuff, right? But to get moving takes a bit, right? There's some wobble, there's the getting those pedals going, because you have to move not just the bike or the car, but all the weight that it's carrying and whatever, right? In motion, okay? Which is why, right, people here in the States know this by this term, and wherever you live in the world, you may have one that matches this. I don't know if you call it the same thing or not, but we have this thing called a California stop, okay? So we come up to a stop sign and we slow down enough that hopefully we can get away with it. There's no cop watching, right? We can slow down enough, look both ways to make sure nobody's coming, and then go right back up to speed, right? Or if we're coming up on a traffic light, right? It's a red light, right? Instead of driving up to it, hitting the brakes and then, I mean, not screeching, but just hitting the brakes and coming to a complete stop before everybody, right? Unless we're in bumper to bumper traffic, what we can often do is just take our foot off the accelerator. And so the car will start slowing down. We can stop if we need to, but what we're trying to do is time the light and everybody moving so we don't have to come to a complete stop, right? So when that light changes and people start moving, we can start easing on the gas again to go, right? And so that's what we want to start breaking up here. We want to avoid, right, that kind of thing. But here's the thing, right? How we do stuff here will determine what he does, right? Universal principle is cause and effect. From the defender's side in a technique, we can see that what he does causes me to do these other things, right? Just like the kata is written, right? Uke does this, right? Uke tsuki, uke keri, whatever, right? And then we, that, okay? Cause and effect. He did this, made me do this, okay? But what I do, when I do it, how I do it, will trigger flinch responses, will trigger other tactics on his side, right? So whatever I do makes him do certain things as well. The technique typically teaches to do things in a way that creates a defensive response on his part, but a defensive response that kind of stalls him, locks him up, sets him up for your next move and whatnot, right? But again, the timing, the angling, how you do what you do, when you do it, all that matters a lot, right? So I'm not going into those today, but there's a huge thing in here, okay? So anyway, so here's the thing, right? Earlier I said that kata often have things embedded in them that imply this stuff, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I want to talk about 3 of these, okay? before I give you these tactics and tips, I don't want to put these in a bubble, right? I want to show you how they're already validated and past masters already put them into what look like static kata, okay? In the beginning, of course, we're going to ignore certain things, or we're just going to accept the step-by-step as it is. But there's a key piece that's going on, right? And one of these three we'll highlight and focus on, right? All right, so I guess we'll just stay with this color, okay? So in the kata, right, there are many ways that this dynamic is shown. But again, it's not easy to see if you don't know what you're looking for, okay? So the first one is, now if you're in Bujinkan or Jininkan Genbukan and you are familiar with the kata of Kotoryu, Gyokoryu, Kukushinden, that kind of stuff, right? It'll be easier to see this. If you're not, you'll have to look through your system's kata or techniques or whatever to find this, if it's there, okay? So in Bujinkan Ninjutsu, Budo Taijutsu, whatever you want to call it, right? Okay. Many kata start off with 2 punches. Okay. The Kihon have 1 fundamental, right? You're learning off a punch. I can move to this angle, right? It's covering fundamentals. But from the Shodan or the Jodiaku Nomaki, right? You start getting more fight scenario-like and not just little waza, little pieces, right? So there's this 2-punch kind of thing. Could there be more? Yeah, but it's been my experience that most of them have 2 punches, right? So most people just accept this as there's 1 punch, there's another punch. He punches, you do this. He punches, you do this, right? But why don't we just do the frickin' technique after the first punch? Why on the second punch? Were we not in the right place for the first punch? See, here's where we go, right? Okay. Remember what I said about that worst case scenario. I'm standing here. He's already loaded for bear. What if? I just covered this with my Tuesday group, my inner circle guys last night in lecture mode. So if one of you guys or many of you guys are on this one, this will help put things into a different format instead of just lecture. So because that's just audio only, right? So, but if I'm just standing here and he's going, right? Why? Right? I'll talk about this with the next one, but what came before? Right? What came before this moment where this punch is being thrown? What came before this moment where this guy shows up in front of me? Okay? So here's something that we need to think about, right? And I cover this with my workplace violence clients all the time and with my advanced students. There's a saying in the self-defense world or workplace violence or whatever that violence is random, right? You never know when that's going to happen, what it's going to look like or whatever. So you need to have things in place so that you can be vigilant, you can be prepared, you can have techniques and strategies and things like that for a wide range of things, okay? So violence is random, right? To us. We don't know when it's going to happen, where or whatever, okay? But there's all this other saying that, you know, people just snap and then no, very rarely, like we're talking less than 1%, does somebody just pop a gasket and become violent, okay? Violence is random to us, but to 99.8% of attackers or whatever the point number is, it's not random. I don't care if they got up on the wrong side of the bed that morning and they were just pissed off looking for somebody, or they decided to target you, or, right? It doesn't matter, right? Very rarely is violence random from the attacker's perspective. So here's the thing. Again, with boxing match, MMA and whatnot, we walk up, we bow, or we bump gloves, we hear the rules, all that kind of stuff. We're just waiting for that bell to go so we can start, right? But in a self-defense situation, in a mugging, you could be in the, what was I supposed to bring home after work? right? You're going down the list, right? Or I'm going to the hardware store because I'm working on a project and, okay, I need this, or I've got the list in my hand or whatever, right? Meanwhile, Joe Cool Jackwagon is already in fight mode. He's already in attack mode. You're in taking care of domestic shit mode, or, oh, look at the clouds, or whatever, right? You're not there. So when he launches his attack, your system is going to have to get changed over through the adrenal response, and you're going to have to get your head out of the to-do list or whatever and into the, oh shit, I'm in a fight, or oh shit, I'm being attacked, so you can catch up, right? So what if the first attack just caused a flinch response, right? And it's implying that by the second attack, you, right? But it's not even that, right? Again, paper was expensive, ink was expensive. Here's this start, okay? It could be 2 attacks. It could be 5 attacks. It could, whatever, okay? So the whole idea here is, if we're really training to understand the reality of the situation and not some fucking fantasy land kind of thing, that, right? I mean, if you really could see violence or an aggressor coming from that far out, and you're always that vigilant no matter what you're doing, why the hell are you still standing there? Why didn't you already pick up a rock or a stick, or disappear from view and flank, the asshole or whatever, and come in from, okay? So again, there's a difference between ego fantasizing and what really goes on in back here in real life, right? So here's this embed in a kata that's showing you may have to deal with one or more things before you're at the right angle and his targets have opened up, so you can do the next thing, right? You have to wait until he makes a mistake, because he might be popping these things off and you don't have time to do anything else other than, right, and to not get hit, right? So again, this is one way to look at it, okay? Another way to look at it is from this perspective. There are some kata and some systems that before the kata is laid out, right, there's this GU, right? GU, okay? JIYU is how we would write it. These 2 kanji, right? GU, okay? There's another one that people will often see in kata, but they never write it out, right? The kata, or the kanji, is for onaji, okay? Onaji. So again, remember, this stuff is written like a list. So people go step 1, step 2, step 3. Okay, those steps are not steps, they're key points. Okay, because there's a lot not written. So, but you got to be careful, because if they write this thing, they write this thing, they write this thing, right? That could be step by step by step, or they could write out 2 or 3 or 4 things, and then either before or after that list, they'll have the word onaji. Okay, onaji means same time, simultaneously. You're going to do these 3 things, these 4 things, these 2 things, or whatever at the same time. See, people don't often translate those things in these translations that get circulating around. Okay, so, but GU, right? GU is a concept, right? From a conventional Japanese translation, GU points to like freedom, not being fettered, not being chained down, not being stuck to like an official way to do things, right? Okay, so there's one way to look at this, but it can also be, by extension, right, expanded out to mean that something came before what's about to be written out. So it could be GU. The first time that I learned the kata Shihodori, it's a kata from the Kukishinden school. It's in the Moguri Gata scroll. Shihodori, four directional catching, right? It really implies infinite catching. But that's where I was exposed to this. We're talking 1985, 4, something like that, right? So when we're discussing this GU, and my teacher was talking about this stuff, right? What he's talking about is the kata is showing that a bunch of shit came before this, and then things just happen to be right that when he throws this lunge punch, right, then you do X, Y, Z, whatever, okay? Now, Shihodori is very tricky. You can do it step by step, but if you understand Shihodori and this GU concept, GU doesn't just mean that something came before it. GU also means that you're not stuck on the model as it is. You can play with things and work through it as long as you maintain the essence, the kotsu of the kata, the essential nature of the kata, then you can play around with this, right? So for my third dan people, right, they work this Shihodori kata, but once they learn it, then at every turn, the uke counters, let's say it's an onikudaki or whatever, they counter that and go to do the next thing, and you have to counter the counter. Then they're going to counter that, and you're going to counter the counter, right? The whole idea is to be effortlessly adaptive, right? But the first way to look at this is that I give my students is this GU is shit came before this, right? So what this does is makes us come up with different initial attack patterns, different ways that the attacker is moving in to manipulate the situation, right? We'll create different backstories, why it's happening, right? Different context, right? Because if you're protecting somebody, if you're alone, if whatever, right? If you're a police officer or security, or if it's in your home, you're going to have different reasons for outcomes to be, right? So this being placed in there communicates to those who know what they're looking at that this is not a box of toys or a jigsaw puzzle that where there's only one way to put it together. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3 is I don't know how to write this out. Kata the Choa reset, right? So let's see. I'm just going to write the word reset. Okay, and what I mean by this, let's see, in the Koto school, in the Shoden no Maki, right? Again, the way I was introduced to these things, everybody gets introduced to things, whatever, right? So there are these 2 kata, and if we're just kata collecting, they just look like 2 different things, right? But they're actually, here's a standalone, and then here's a what if, right? So the kata is Keo and Keito, okay? So one of these kata, doesn't matter which one, you can always look this shit up. It's all over YouTube. I mean, how many people can be demonstrating the same kata, right? So one of them shows the ideal, right? Here's this thing. He throws an attack, boom, 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 you do it, okay? The other one shows at a point in that first kata, he stumbles back, recollects himself, and comes back in, right? Oh, shit. And there's a different finish, okay? But there's also ways to do your kata where we get this way, because for my third dans and above, I may need this guy like flat on his face in an arrest position or in a restraint so the cops can show up, or who knows, my wife has time to come over and kick him in the teeth because he slapped her, whatever. That's not gonna happen. Anyway, right? But I started off with initial logic to get this guy into a certain position. He countered that, and now we're duking it out, but I need to steer the fight back to getting him in that initial ground position, right? So kata, shit, things get derailed, but I need to steer things back so it ends the same way, right? Again, right? GU, right? So this is where I want to focus, okay? I want to focus here, right? GU is implied here, and GU is implied here. What you have is just models that are showing set things, okay? But the implication is still there. But I want to focus on this thing coming before, but I'm going to flip it. So instead of focusing on what he's doing before. I want to focus on sneaky shit you can do before. Okay. So, because again, we want to avoid. Where's my red? I know some of you guys, like in Japan, right? It's a triangle. In the States here, it's an octagon, right? Okay. I want to avoid you coming to or starting from a dead stop, right? The only time that this should happen, where you're just a sitting duck, you're standing still, is a blind. You just got blindsided, right? You know, you're one of these teenagers or old enough to know better but doesn't. People that are walking around doing this while they're walking down the street and shit like that. Look, you get what you get, right? Karma, right? But we want to avoid this static start, which is where we're going to end up over here, okay? So let's take a look at 5 of these sneaky little ninja tactics. The trick with these is he shouldn't know that you're manipulating the situation, okay? But you are, okay? For a lot of people, they learn these things. I see them in Japan, right? They learn these things. They mean well, but they tuck them away as things you could do, okay? But they're not a kata. The guy doesn't end up on the ground because you don't finish with a throw or whatever, right? But what I'm going to lay out here these are critical things, because what we're looking at doing is breaking his strength, his balance, his control, that kind of stuff, so that even if a shot lands, it's not going to have the same effect that he wanted it to have. Okay? This is purely in the realm of dynamics. Okay? We want to minimize the force of his attack. Okay? For those of you going through our program, or even Stephen Hayes' program, I think it's still in the Toshindo. I haven't tracked that stuff for decades, but we have these 5 Ds, right? Discern, defend, disrupt, deliver, discern, right? So phase 2, defend, is not about whipping your technique on the person. That's deliver. That's phase 4, right? Phase 2, defend, is neutralizing the force of his attack, making it not damaging, okay? Which is different than making him not hit you. You're in a fight. I just covered close range knife defenses last night with my advanced group, and what I kept reiterating over and over again, because they get this question and answer way back in the Q levels, right? What's the one thing that you can guarantee if you're defending against a knife-wielding attacker? You're going to get cut. You're going to get stabbed. Okay? Your job is not to not get cut or not get stabbed. That would be a bonus, but that's not your job. Your job is not to get cut or stabbed to the degree that the fucking TV gets turned off and your family has to dress in black and you don't get to see it. Okay? Priorities, right? So in a fight, right, in an actual attack, sorry, your job's not to not get hit. The one thing you can guarantee is you're going to get grabbed or kicked or hit or whatever, because you're not fighting a freaking moron. You're not fighting somebody who knows nothing, right? They probably have experience. And even if they don't, sometimes it's harder to defend against somebody who's untrained and just fucking going at it than the person who's fighting from some sense of style and predictability. Right? There's an old saying in Japan with regards to swordsmen. Right? It's easier to defend against a trained swordsman than it is somebody who's swinging a blade like an axe wielder chopping down trees. Right? One is predictable. The other one, not so much. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at these. Right. So again, I'm going to be covering several of these during Friday's virtual training thing. So if you want to get signed up for that, that'd be great. If not, no big deal. Okay. All right. So here's, let's see. So if he's in motion, I'm just going to write you too. All right. If he's in motion, you should be in motion. Okay. You don't wait for him to get 2/3 or 3/4 there before you move. Now, and this is gonna look odd because I'm gonna have the opposite down here at a certain point. But when I'm teaching beginners and they're first starting, because beginners, very often have the fear of getting hit, they'll move too soon. So their partner's throwing a punch and they'll move too soon, and then they can't figure out why they're too far, not far enough, or whatever. So we have them wait longer before they move. Again, they're starting from a static position. It's beginner training, right? And the rule is, right, don't move until that fist is 2/3 to 3/4 the way to you. And then we explain the cognitive gap and processing and whatnot, that from the time he moves that fist, it could hit you if you don't control the kukan. But what's happening is, from the time the light reflects off of that and you recognize that it's moving and the processor gets your muscles to move, that fist at minimum is going to be 2/3 to 3/4 of its way to you, right? Later on, intermediate advanced people work on that from the perspective of last second tricky timing, right? Let it come in. Let him be sure it's going to hit, right? Either way. But the idea here is, if he's in motion, you should be in motion too. That doesn't mean that as soon as he starts shifting like this, you start, that's too soon, okay? Because the other thing that beginner to intermediate start getting is not where the fist is, because some people punch like this, right? Some people, boom, straight on, right? What they're going to watch is the rear foot. So they don't move until the foot clears the floor, because now he can't steer until he puts his foot back down. The human body is really terrible at maneuvering unless both feet are on the floor, right? Yes, you can leap in certain directions, but you know what? You can't change direction until you land, right? You can roll from position to position, but you can't maneuver until you come out of that and you're not affected by the inertia anymore, right? I know. See how people put the comments down? Stop talking about this science bullshit. Just put gloves on. Whatever, okay? What I'm talking about is, you can't see my legs, but as soon as his knees start to go or his shoulders start to go or whatever, and he's starting to move, from my Shizen position, my knees are going to start to drop. My knees are going to start to soften up, right? So that my legs are in motion, and it's easier to steer a leg and move a leg that's already in motion than to get a leg in motion, okay? So I want to do that. The other thing could be, if he's moving in on me, even if he hasn't thrown something and he's getting to the edge of that kukan, what I want to do is be moving, right, to maintain it, right? And we'll talk about that here in a minute, right? So if he's in motion, you should be in motion. The opposite is also true if I'm affecting a technique on somebody, okay? If let's say I'm doing a ganseki nage or a rear hip throw or something like that, if I'm in motion and his body is static, he's kicking your ass, okay? Because the only way for that to be true is if my joints are not where they're supposed to be and I'm moving past my hand and he's ending up behind me, right? So now I'm putting myself into a weak spot. He's in a strong spot. Throwing him is going to be difficult, right? When I move, his body needs to be moving, right? If his body's not moving when mine is moving, I have a problem. If my body's not moving when his is moving, I have a problem, okay? It's the dynamics part of things, okay? This, I've already alluded to this, but the next one, again, no particular order, but stay ahead, right, of his advance, right? Stay ahead of his advance. This doesn't mean move at the same time or move before him. If you move before him, he'll just track you, right? If he starts to go and he's not fully committed or his foot hasn't left the ground or whatever, and you start to move, only your training partner still punches the same space in time, which is great for beginners. For intermediate advance, you're screwing yourself for training, right? So if you start to hedge left or right when he starts going, it's just easy for him to track you. He's not aiming for that space where your head is. He wants to punch you in the face. So if you move your face too soon, he's going to follow your face and punch it wherever it goes. If you move your face too late, well, your face gets punched. We get that, right? So there is a best there's a time that we should be working on, right? When can he might be able to see me move, but he can't adjust his body that fast at speed, because everything's about at speed. Okay, right? Remember, anything is possible with slow motion soft training. Okay, pressure testing it, well, maybe not so much. Okay, so first thing I talked about is staying ahead of his advance. This all goes back to this. If he's in motion, you need to be in motion too. So stay ahead of his advance. So when he's coming in, knees are going to soften. I may need to shuffle back because he may be pressing in. He's looking to get into the best position he can be in to jack you. He's not giving you a free shot, right? So as he's pressing in to get into the perfect position, because if he's a jabber, he needs to be in jab range where a jab is going to affect. It doesn't have to hit you, but it does need to get you into a position where he can rack you with the next piece, right? So as he's moving in, there's that, we call it the kukan, right? This base of potential, right? This thing. One of the rules of the kukan is you don't put anything in the kukan you're not willing to give up for the rest of your life. You let him put things in the kukan. The kukan is like an open bear trap. You know, spring-loaded things, metal with teeth and all that. They take the bait or they step in and bang, okay? You come on, all these kind of things. If you can see them as traps, awesome. But you don't go stepping into the damn trap, okay? So I want to stay ahead of him. So as he's moving in, I might, take these steps back so that I'm ahead of him. He's not getting any ground. And so what will happen is he will either readjust and refigure things out, or if you do it at the right time, he'll try to speed up because he feels like he's going to lose an opportunity, like you're going to get away from him, right? They have to remember original intent. This guy wants to jack you, so right, he's not going to go, well, maybe tomorrow. Well, if that's it, I'm going to break your legs today, right? So this is why you don't, once somebody starts engaging in an attack, right, from the warrior's perspective, you don't let this thing reset, okay? Because now you're going to be looking over your shoulder for a long time. Once it initiates, it needs to finish, okay? And that's why in the advanced levels, we do things to trigger so that, right, he doesn't get to reset. You started this shit, let's finish this, okay? All right, so again, so what we're looking at here for one of these, right, is that thing I just talked about, right? Maintaining the kukan, right? Maintaining that space, okay? Biggest mistake that most people can make when violating this is leaving themselves get close enough that jabs or feints or psych outs will cause a flinch response, and then all your training just went out the damn proverbial window or the shoji screen or whatever, right? And now you're screwed, okay? The kata are showing ski, these lunge punches and whatnot, because the tori, the defender, has maintained a certain distance, an initial safe distance, that forces the attacker to take the shot, even if it's uncomfortable for them, because it's the best they're going to get. Okay? Is that written in the scrolls? No, it's passed through the kuden, right? Right. So I want to stay ahead of those things, right? So preferably, I want to be 1.5 steps based on his gait, and you'll learn that by working with different size training partners. If you always work with the same size people, same comfort level, whatever, right? Things that you don't do and experience for yourself, you can only theorize about, okay? You know what they say about theory and opinions, right? It's like assholes. Everybody has one, right? So next aspect of this is in that as he goes, I'm going. I can't be late. I can't be early because he'll reset or track me, but I can't be late, right? So call this mirroring, call it whatever you want, right? But this is one of the 4 sens, right? This is Gono sen. Okay. We did a thing on the sens a while back, but Gono sen is, for those of you who know and operate with the Godai. For those of you who don't or think it's bullshit, well, I'm not talking to you, right? But for the people that understand it, Gono sen is the water strategy, okay? It's responsiveness, right? I initiate my physical movement upon his attack, right? Sendo sen is a different one. I initiate my physical movement upon his intent to attack, and then there's sen, sen, no sen, that kind of thing, right? So go no sen, right? So it's this responsive mirroring kind of strategy, right? You go with the attack, okay? Again, I talked about moving back, but I could also add some hedging left or right. So he has to constantly make these little adjustments, and it fires more muscles in his body as he's trying to figure out where I'm going to be before he throws the attack, okay? The more muscle tension I can create in his body, the slower I can get him to go, the more I can screw up his own sense of timing, okay? So again, just these little things, and he doesn't know that I'm manipulating him, because he does shit like that too, but he doesn't. People tend to not do it scientifically. They do it to be tricky. These end up being tricky because we understand the science and we're applying it in a way that's not obvious to him. And that's the difference. Okay? That's the difference. Okay? All right. Number 3 is going to sound counterintuitive, right? I'm going to let him touch me. With his strike, with his kick, okay, I'm going to learn to move back just enough that he can touch me but not damage me, right? The lesson here is you need to understand the difference between being hit or touched and being damaged, okay? And the psychology here is if he tags you, his brain scores a hit, okay? So the strategy here is he gets what he wants. He just doesn't get the results he wanted. He gets what he wants, just not the way he wanted it. Okay. So again, difference between getting hit and getting hurt, right? Now, I'm running out of time here, so I got to keep moving, right? So I already talked about this one. Use last second tricky timing. Okay. So this can be combined with any of these things, right? But what we're looking at here is this isn't just that beginner thing where I'm standing still and I'm waiting for it to come in and then I'm going to move. That's a big model that helps a student understand how he's bracing for impact. And then when he misses, there's this microsecond of unbalance where he's fighting gravity and he's fighting inertia. He can't fight me, okay? So if I can employ that on the move, right, dynamically, everything changes, right? So what we're looking at here is pausing briefly, right, to give him an opportunity before he's ready, okay? So here's an example of this, right? Again, too early, he's not going to take the shot, right? Too late, you're going to take the shot, okay? But here's an example. We'll go back up to this in motion and staying ahead of him. So as he's moving in, I might start out with bigger footsteps backwards, right? Moving back. And then as he gets closer and I know where that range is, I'll start to slow my movement down, right? And then I might like stop, or I'll slow down enough that I'm still in motion, but I'll slow down. And then all of a sudden he'll be catching up faster. Okay, because remember, if I'm backing away, he's going to move in trying to go fast enough to catch up, right? So here's the thing. I can't do anything about this guy wanting to attack. I can't do anything about him wanting to attack me. I can't do a lot about how he attacks. But one of the first things that every student can work on is choosing the time that they're allowed to attack. Gives you so much more control, right? So I start backing away and then I change that, but I only hold that position or that slower thing as he's moving in for no longer than the count of 1/1000. Right? That's a full second. So no longer than half to 1 full second. And then I'm breaking from that angle and readjusting because I'm giving him enough time to recognize an opportunity. And if he doesn't take it, I want him to feel the letdown of having missed an opportunity. So the next time I do it, he's more likely to take it. Right? Again, I'm manipulating him based on his needs, not based on his logic. Okay. Same reason we all buy shit off of advertisements. Okay. I have a self-identity that's cool for, or I have a self-identity that's bullshit, man. Who would ever buy that? It's the same thing with the way we choose martial arts. Okay. So what I want is this moment. So if I pick that timing right and he suddenly is catching up, remember, his brain's made a bunch of calculations about what he's going to throw, the distance he needs, where he needs to be positioned with me, right? Plus there's that imperative sense of I got to get him because this guy's moving around a whole lot, right? So if he's rushing, if this is happening, right? See the time staying the same, and all of a sudden I slow down and he comes rushing in, right? What I'm forcing him to do is to take his shot before he's ready to take the shot. He thinks he's ready, but his body, he has to rush the shot. So his footwork isn't as stable, his timing is off. You get the idea? So even if it lands, we've got this diminishing return, okay? But I'm forcing him to go at my time, not at his time. I'm flipping the paradigm. I point this out a lot in training. You know, that thing, okay? Hopefully you can see that, right? The yin-yang, okay? The attacker is always trying to force you to deal with him the way he's comfortable and push you into or outside of your own comfort zone, okay? Basketball players trying to get the baseball player to shoot hoops with it, okay? What I need to do is do things that force him to play the game my way. He can still do his style. He can still punch the way he wants. He can still do his thing, but the timing, right? If I can force him, right? It's kind of like a magician getting you to choose the card that they already know you're going to take, right? You think you have free will, and that's the idea, okay? The key to all this stuff here is getting to a point where, and this was like one of the first lessons I learned as a white belt, the ninja takes control away from their attacker long before the attacker realizes that he lost it. Most people think they've lost control at the moment in a physical technique where they go off balance, or the strike is landing, or the throw is being executed, or whatever, and they have to execute a break fall or whatever. They see that as the moment I lost control. No, all of this is about getting this guy to lose control before he's ever thrown the first punch, kick, or grab. And if you can't do it before, then you do it after, okay? Got a bunch of these things that are happening, not after, but during, right? So I got all these things here that, for most part, they're the during, okay? Let's look at one more that is before, okay? I'm just going to write this word out. There's a whole section in the Kotoryu scrolls called Kudaidori. For most people, well, that's just the list of kata, or the list of kamae. Yeah, okay. So here's the question. How does the kamae allow you to catch the right moment? How does the kamae allow you to play in space? How does the kamae allow you to manipulate things and control his perception of space or the moment, right? How? It's one thing to be able to regurgitate answers or lessons verbally, and it's a whole other thing to understand how it works, okay? So what we're looking at here with the Kudaidori is we understand that typically the attacker is going to be an opportunist. If you're good at covering and staying on the move and whatnot, right? To get at you to do the whole conquest kind of thing, he's going to have to pick at things to open you up, right? And then hopefully get in there and hammer away, right? So one example of this, and again, you can play with it, right, is if I'm backing away this way, square, right, all my targets are open, right? But if I back away this way, right, see how more of this is leading, right? It's not the same. If I pull this shoulder back in line with my rear foot, there's a 4 to 6 inch difference right here, okay? So what I can do is every time he's getting to that position to be able to take this shot, I can just reset in the opposite direction. Now I just gained what? 8 to 14 inches. Okay? There you go, guys. You don't need the pills. Anyway, no, just kidding. Right? So anyway, right? What we can do is shift or go from one kamae to another, and it changes the distance, it changes the angle, it changes the accessibility, those kind of things, right? So what I'm doing is always making him feel like he has to catch up, like he has to replan because shit changed, right? I need for him to feel like he wants me to feel. Okay. So when my teachers told me this, and when I'm passing this stuff on to you guys, that if you think this is BS and you just put on gloves and get in the ring and do whatever, then just do that thing, right? If you feel the need, you got to put flaming comments down in the comments. Do what you do, you. I'm just going to delete them anyway, so it doesn't fucking matter, right? But it's this stuff, right, that now makes you look at things, not just the technique or the attack that he's throwing. Is it a hook? Is it a roundhouse kick? Is it a jab? Is his elbow up? Is his elbow down? I don't give a shit. He still has to touch me with it. He still has to catch me. He still has to pin me down. He still has to get a good shot. Because again, my job is not to not get hit. It's an attack. Chances are I'm going to get hit. If I don't get hit, thank you, universe. Thank you, Jesus. Whatever you want to throw in there, right? But my job is to minimize damage. My job is to do what I need to do while reducing the wear and tear on me. Energy expenditure, how he's hitting me, whatever, okay? If I understand psychology and this guy tagged me, so he scores a hit, but there's this gnawing feeling that it wasn't enough, the next one he's going to commit more to, that gives me more energy to play with, okay? Because he can't help himself. He wants to hurt me. He is driven by his needs. If I understand that, and I understand how to not get in my own way by thinking I can just stand still and wait for things, or that I won't be in shit. I need to put gas in the car. Bam. Right? If we don't take those kind of things into account, then there's this issue, right? If we're too kata specific and we don't recognize that the kata are in some way are showing that shit happens. Kata can not go as planned, and you're going to have to put something else in there, right? You're not trapped by it. You're not in what one of my teachers calls technique prison, right? And there's already, like, these things are wired in, right? That are showing you why 2 punches, why might it be 5 or whatever. Well, basic reason is my freaking brain might have to catch up to the, oh shit, I'm being attacked. Oh shit, I'm in a fight. Okay? Your system hasn't changed over. The adrenals are still kicking in, which is going to throw your system off, right? Balance, coordination, all kinds of things during that transition. It's not the same as boxers and sport fighters, right? They've already got themselves jazzed. They get up there, and the closer they get to that bell ringing, see, the adrenals are already kicking in, so they're already ready to go. It's not the same for a self-defense situation. Not even close, okay? Having been there, right? So anyway, this is what I have. Let's see, I had 2, let's see. Make sure I didn't miss anything in my notes. Okay, yeah, just this is what I have. Again, quick reminders, right? Register for the Friday class if you want to see how you get some physical examples for this thing. And also, if you do us the favor of liking and sharing so that other people can get these lessons, that would be awesome, right? So other than that, that's what I have. I'll see you next time. Whiteboard Wednesday. See you next week.